John McMullen, I'm Jody McDonald. That makes us Smack a Mac here on Birds 365. Yes, a week getting underway. Hopefully, everybody had a great, lengthy 4th of July weekend. We thank our boss, Joe Krause, for giving us a couple extra days to get rested and relaxed before a long football season, which we're now less than 3 weeks away from Eagles camp when it opens up. Johnny Mac, when it does open up, there are going to be a bunch of positional battles. Let me get one particular one on the table to debate today. As Mike Gill just said, who's the backup center? Who's the starting center? Who's the backup center? Some fan bases more into it than others, and we know how diehard the Eagle fan base is. But it doesn't matter which team you're talking about. Everybody likes to debate the quarterback position. You never want to debate the starting quarterback position. You want to have that guy locked in, sure, ready to go. And we know that that's the case here in Philadelphia with the kind of season Jalen Hurts had this year. And we believe Marcus Mariota is going to be the backup. He came here to replace Gardner Minshew, who decided to join his buddy in Indianapolis, Shane Steichen, and maybe be the bridge guy to lead into Anthony Richardson. But the third string quarterback, which remember, we haven't discussed this in a while. The NFL redid its rules this year because of basically one game. That would be the NFC Championship game in which the San Francisco 49ers, and yeah, I put this on John Lynch. You cut him more slack than I did. You said he went to his first string got hurt, second string got hurt. What do you want the guy to do? To have a better option than Josh Johnson. That was a joke. Josh Johnson being a quarterback in a conference championship game should never happen. So the NFL, like me, probably overreacted and said, we're redoing the rules. If you've got your third string quarterback on your 53-man roster on game day, you are allowed to put him in, even if you don't activate him, you are allowed to put him in as an emergency quarterback. It was a rule that was in place for years in the NFL, and for some reason, they did away with it. I'm not sure exactly why they did, but they rightfully have brought back the emergency quarterback. So last year, Ian Book was on the Eagles roster all year, right? He never got they never opted him down.
Yeah,
he
was a part of the roster, picked up on waivers, off waivers from the New Orleans Saints. The Eagles value that third quarterback, and so did San Francisco. San Francisco was down to the fourth quarterback, so it is what it is. I mean, you're screwed either way. Is my only points with if you're down, because if we look at who's going to be the third string quarterback, I think that's where you're going. I think there's a legitimate shot for each player. I think the Eagles will default to the draft pick, their draft pick, even though Ian Book was a higher draft pick, but they'll default to their draft pick this year if it's even or close to even. It's typically how they do business. But then if you think about it, and even if you get Ian Book through waivers, put him on the practice squad and keep 4 quarterbacks, if you're down to Ian Book in the NFC Championship game, you're not going to be in good shape.
Ian Book better than Josh Johnson.
Yeah, probably.
That was my whole rub last year. We've seen Josh Johnson, I think, has been on every team in the NFL twice and some 3 times. That he is such a traveled veteran.
But Ian Book was the third string quarterback. This year he would be the 4th string quarterback if that worked out the way. Remember, Brock Purdy was the 3rd string quarterback. They were already down to the 3rd string. So it's Brock Purdy versus Ian Book, which I know you're going to give the edge to Brock Purdy there. And you should. I mean, Brock proved a lot of things. Typically 3rd string quarterback. Typically you're screwed when you get to the 3rd string quarterback. That's why what San Francisco did was so amazing. 4th string, that's where I get the look. In that instance, maybe San Francisco, you remember all the stories, maybe they were hopeful Jimmy Garoppolo could play in case of emergency or whatever. Otherwise, you can bring somebody off the street. I don't know that helps you. I don't know what else you can do. If you're down to the 4th quarterback, you're in trouble. You should have been long gone with the 3rd quarterback, to be honest. and they persevered. So they deserve credit for that.
Yeah.
I
Sorry, I'm throwing a flag and calling it roster mismanagement on John Lynch. It wasn't like Brock Purdy became the starting quarterback that week. He had been the starting quarterback for 7 weeks leading up to that game. And in 7 weeks, you couldn't find a better quarterback than Josh Johnson. Yeah, you should have been able to. So you and I will disagree on that. I will hold the GM accountable for not having a better option, because you're right. On that given day, he was the backup. He wasn't the fifth string. He wasn't the guy. Yeah. You've already gone through Lance. You've already gone through Garoppolo, whether they could or couldn't have played. On that given day, you have to have a better option if Brock Purdy gets hurt than Josh Johnson. They didn't. So this year, at least they'll have a third string option to be able to step in and play on game day as an emergency starter. You said you think that if all things are equal, Tanner McKee will be the guy because they drafted him. Is that the right line of thinking? They were able to scoop up Ian Book off waivers. The Saints didn't protect him. The Eagles protected him all year. So at least they made that commitment to him. If it is equal, you think it's McKee just because of what have you done?
Well, I think if it's
This
equal,
year?
I think Ian Book, if he outplays him, he'll win the job. I think, which it should be, as a third string quarterback. You kind of saw it, like Carson Strong had the leg up to be the third string quarterback last year. He was awful. I mean, if Tanner McKee shows up and he's awful, they'll go in a different direction. They had Reed Sinnett as well last year. He was not much better than awful. That's why they went out of the organization to pick up Ian Book. And, we haven't seen either of them. I think Ian Book better fits this offense. He's got some movement skills. Tanner McKee's a more of a traditional drop back passer. So you would have to change the offense if you were down to playing him. So how comfortable do the Eagles feel with that? They claim they're comfortable with it. And it's not that big of a deal. But I do think it'll be a legitimate competition. I'm just saying if nobody significantly outplays the other, and it's basically, if you have 14 days of training camp and it's, Ian was better in 8 days than 6 for Tanner McKee, I think that's the part where it gets a little shaky. I think then they probably default to McKee because they drafted him, which I don't agree with. But if Book significantly outplays Tanner McKee, they're not going to keep Tanner McKee because they drafted him. They cut Clayton Thorson because he was awful, and he was a 5th round pick. So they'll cut Tanner McKee, but I think he has the leg up, the default leg up because they drafted.
How much of the decision do you believe is shaped by who they think they can most easily get through to the practice squad? That if they still like both guys, someone may play slightly better than the other, but pretty damn close, and they got to make a call. One's going to be released and hit the street, and they can try and woo them back to the practice squad as much as they possibly can, but everybody's going to take a job. If somebody says, we're going to make you our third quarterback, then whoever they cut, McKee and or Book, is going to go to that team that's going to give them a full-time NFL check rather than a practice squad check here. But how much do you think the decision is based on who they think they can get back to the practice squad because they don't get a job on somebody else's 3-man?
Not much, because if you think, you're keeping 3 quarterbacks. So if you think somebody is susceptible to being claimed off waivers, you're not going to risk it just because there's, maybe you say, well, McKee's got better arm talent. And maybe somebody will claim him, but Book is a better player, and try to get Book through the practice. I don't think they would do that. At that level, I don't think that comes into it. And I also think that's overrated, and people kind of forget every year They're like, the Eagles are so deep, they're going to claim 6, 7 people up. Never happens. Never happens. Because, you have to understand, every other team has 90-man rosters.
Right.
And they're working with their own young players, and they're in the system, in their particular schemes. And they like them for that reason. Then they've been working with them. And they're just going to take some guy who they know nothing about, who they haven't worked with, and say, oh, now if it's a significant upgrade from a talent standpoint, yeah, you'll probably see 2 or 3 Eagles claimed off waivers at the cut down because they're one of the deepest teams. But it won't go much deeper than that. It won't be this groundswell. And they've been caught. Brett Toth, I always mention, they thought they could get him through to the practice squad, and Arizona claimed it. But even that was a unique situation because he was coming off the deferment, and they changed the rule. He lost a bunch of weight, and the Eagles were like, well, he's got to get in the weight room. He's not even ready to play, so nobody's going to take a shot on him. So there were all these extenuating circumstances even to that. Whereas Jordan Mailata is the exact opposite. They were concerned that somebody might pick him up, and they said, all right, we're just going to stash him on the back end of the roster. For 2 stinking years, they did it because they didn't want to risk losing him.
Yep.
They don't want to risk losing a player. They're not putting them on waivers.
And that was the exact way to handle Jordan Mailata, as we now see by the results. All right, one more quick question, then we'll get a break. Then we'll get our buddy Rob Marty from the AP up here. Since we're talking about the 3rd, 4th string quarterbacks and the like, Eagles coaching staff, they got a new quarterback coach this year. The old quarterback coach is now the offensive coordinator, and they hired a first-time quarterback coach, but a recognizable name who's in the league for years. If there's anybody who can determine what you need out of your 3rd or 4th string quarterback, might be Alex Tanney, because he was that for such a lengthy period of time. But being one and coaching as one can be a different story. Know that Sirianni has talked him up a blue streak to this point, that he has fit right in and become a member of this staff, and that he seems to be comfortable in his new role. It is a new role. It is an updated role for a guy like Alex Tanney. Should we have any questions about the Eagles quarterback coach this year?
I don't think so, because he was there, similar to DK McDonald. He was the assistant to Denard Wilson. Alex Tanney was the assistant to Brian Johnson last year, so he was in the room already with the quarterbacks. So they're very familiar with him. He's played for a very long time. I always make that argument. It's like, oh, he's got no experience. Well, he was in the league for. I say it more about Josh McCown when people would say, how could you give this to Josh McCown? Well, he played for stinking 18 years in every scheme under the sun. He knows a little bit about playing the position. Same with Alex. And, you don't know until they do it. But I think, Brian Johnson and Jalen Hurts are so close. I think Brian's still the de facto quarterback coach anyway with the number 1 quarterback. Then maybe it becomes a bigger deal with Marcus and Ian and Tanner McKee. And, by the way, Alex Tanney, former teammate with Marcus Mariota, when he came into the league, the two are as thick as thieves. So I think that helps as well.
And Tanney, not quite the level of McCown, 10-year veteran in the league, not a almost 20-year veteran. There's a little bit of a difference, and Alex never even achieved the level of McCown did. McCown was a backup basically his entire career, but at least he did play some. Tanney did a lot of clipboard holding, but that's a valuable experience for being a quarterback coach. We'll see if he's up to the task coming in this season. And when you've got your former quarterback coach as the offense coordinator, you know that they're going to be working.
And the history says backup quarterbacks tend to be better coaches than starting quarterbacks, because they, it was some of the great quarterbacks, like, they don't understand why people can't do what they can do. And, the backup quarterback understands, hey, it's not that easy. You got to do this, you got to do that. So, it's like backup catcher in baseball. They're great managers. Backup quarterbacks, they tend to be good coaches.
We'll see if Alex Stanley gets the job done for the Birds in that role this year. All right, Jody Mac, Johnny Mac, coming back. We haven't had Rob Marty on in about a month, the lead writer for the Associated Press covering the National Football League. Philly guy at heart, even though he's living down there in South Florida these days. He'll always be a Philly guy to us. Rob Marty, Associated Press, up next here on Birds 360.